So this is the first part of a 3-part sold out webinar series. So you're quite fortunate that you've got in, because there's 100 people on today and there's a lot more wanting to attend. And what we're going to look at today is the UKCA. How is this going to impact your business? So the second and third parts of this series will be tomorrow and Wednesday, where we'll be discussing how you can gain UKCA marking. And we'll also look at the transition from ETA to UKTA respectively on Tuesday and Wednesday. Just a quick note that each of these webinars and the attributing slides will be available on our website, and you'll also receive notification and a link to the recording and the slides after. So just a very quick intro to the BBA. So for those of you that don't know, the BBA have been around for more than 50 years, and we've been helping the construction and manufacturing industry in many ways right through the supply chain. The BBA looks to develop long-term partnerships and continue growth in both UK and global markets, but they always remain reassuringly impartial. The BBA is actually a for-profit organisation limited by guarantee. So that means we always look to reinvest in the industry as a whole for the benefit of all stakeholders, which means your good selves that are on this webinar today. Here are just some numbers, not going to read them all, but needless to say, the big number there, 6,000 plus certificates issued over 50 years. And there's a few other big numbers on there, which I'll let you digest at your leisure. But needless to say, we're in the industry for the long haul, and we have been for a long time. But that's enough of an intro to the BBA. That's not what we're here today to discuss. What we're here to cover today is the UKCA and how it's going to impact your business. The clock is very much ticking on the UKCA marking and other things to do with Brexit. And you need to make sure that you have the right conformity, certification, and all those kind of things for this change that's come in from CA marking to UKCA. So what this webinar will do will help you get to grips with what all the changes are, what it means for you, your organisation, and the products you sell. So in the webinar, we're going to cover, as you can see on the screen, how UKCA marking will affect your business, the changes taking place right now, what to expect in the future, maybe, who knows, and the first steps you need to take to ensure that you are ready. And finally, we'll have a brief Q&A session to answer your burning questions that we may not have asked in this very quick prompt half-hour webinar. If you do have any questions, please use the Q&A function on this webinar. We'll do our best to cover those questions at the end, but time permitting. If we don't, we promise we'll get back to you after the webinar has concluded. So please do this, use this feature, because it can be invaluable for us as well as yourselves. So without further ado, our presenter today is Mr. John Alban, who's the Chief Scientific Officer for the BBA. And John has over 30 years experience with the BBA. So we're in safe hands, I like to think. And that being said, John, welcome, and over to you.
Thanks, Peter. Morning, everybody. I'm conscious that a number of the attendees today have actually had the misfortune of hearing me talk about this before, so apologies in advance. Some of this information you will have seen before, but there is additional content, particularly towards the end of the presentation, so I hope it will be useful to you. Okay, Peter. So those of you who have seen this before will be aware we always make this little health warning at the start, and the presentation I'm going to give is the BBA's interpretation of where we are to the best of our knowledge and ability. We are very much in the hand of government and other organisations such as UKCA, however, and so everything that I say to you today is going to be subject to confirmation by others. Please don't make any firm decisions on the basis of what I'm going to tell you, and this is more true of this presentation than it has been some of the others, as you'll see as we go through it. Okay, Peter? So very briefly, quick summary of CE marking, which is what we had prior Brexit. It was based on the EU construction products regulation and was intended as a passport to get products across the EU without there being any additional national requirements being placed. So it was a consistent route of declaring the performance of a product that you could describe it in exactly the same way in Germany as you did in Finland or the UK. There were two routes to CE marking. The first, the mandatory route, was where a product was covered by a harmonised European standard. If your product was not covered by a harmonised European standard, then you still had the option to voluntarily CE mark the product. If you chose to do that, there were, if you like, pseudo standards equivalent to harmonised European standards in some ways, setting out the specification you had to follow, and these were initially E-tags and then EADs. These were handled by an organisation called IOTA, which was an association of organisations such as the BBA. And the UKCA/UKNI system has been set up very much to parallel this CE marking system in every way but specific to the UK. Okay, Peter? Very briefly, the EADs and harmonised standards included a definition of an Avcp level. This was from the highest level at 1+ down to the lowest at system 4, and it defined the level of participation of a organisation such as the BBA, known as a notified body, carrying out post-issue certification and sometimes pre-issue testing as part of the CE marking process. Next slide, Peter. So I said it's a parallel system, and all of the documents and organisations and systems that were previously put in place by the EU for CE marking have now been paralleled in the UK. So, for example, harmonised European standards have been republished by BSI as UK designated standards. The voluntary route required on a European technical assessment, or an ETA, we now have the UK equivalent of a UKTA, a UK technical assessment. The supporting bodies, previously known as notified bodies within the EU, and indeed they still are notified bodies within the EU, the UK equivalent is known as a UK approved body. So throughout the process, there are equivalent organisations and systems to parallel that for CE marking. Okay, Peter? So the marking themselves, UKCA marking is intended for use in England, Scotland and Wales, so Great Britain. The timescale for this, it's mandatory for applicable products, i.e. those covered by a designated standard, for new products from the 1st of January this year. So you have a new affected product, you should already be applying UKCA marking. It becomes mandatory for all applicable products from the 1st of January next year. So we have a transition period until the end of this year. And conformity tasks, such as certificates of factory production control, must be carried out by an approved body based in the UK. Next slide, Peter. UKNI is slightly more complicated, I'll come on to that in a moment, but this slide is intended to show that the timescale for UKNI marking is exactly the same as that for UKCA marking. And again, conformity tasks for UKNI marking must be carried out by a UK approved body. And finally, CE marking. It's almost no change for CE marking. If you're exporting into the European Union and your product requires CE marking, you are still required to CE mark in exactly the same way as prior to Brexit. The only difference, and there's a mistake on this slide I'm afraid, the only difference is that conformity tasks must be carried out by an EU notified body, not EU approved body as it says there. So EU notified body for CE marking. That's a very, very quick snapshot, so I've only got half an hour, but there is a lot of information published by UK government, including detailed guidance on how to and where to UKCA mark products, details of the various UK conformity bodies such as the BBA and the scopes of their approval, and a list of all designated standards. This presentation will be made available at the end, and you can follow those links to get the information straight from the horse's mouth. Very briefly, everything I'm talking about this morning is connected to the UK CPR, so UKCA marking. Most of the products for which you will have been familiar with the BBA for the past 55 years are not affected by Brexit in any way. So Agreement or BBA certificates, our testing services, our management system certification to ISO 9000, 14000, and other services such as microgeneration, competent person schemes and certificates of competency of performance, all unaffected by this process. Next one, Peter. So for the UKCA, the activities you're going to have to carry out is going to depend on a number of factors. Firstly, where you're based, where you want to sell, whether or not your product is covered by a harmonised stroke designated standard, if it is, the Avcp level of that document, the location of your third-party conformity organisation, so a notified body in the EU or an approved body in the UK, and whether it's a new product or an existing product. You have a different timescale depending on the age of the product. Okay, Peter? So in terms of the marking, if you wish to place your goods on the market in Northern Ireland, I would recommend you continue to CE mark the product in exactly the same way as you have done up until Brexit. CE marking will continue to be accepted in Northern Ireland for the foreseeable future, or for as long as the UK continues to have a working relationship with the EU. If you do choose to CE mark the product, as I've said, you need to use an EU-based notified body in support of that process where one is required. Alternately, if you want to use a UK-based approved body, you can do that, and in that case, you will mark the product with both CE marking and UK NI marking. There is no situation where you can apply UK NI marking in isolation. It always has to be accompanied by a CE marking mark. So for the rest, can you go back one, please? Sorry, I hadn't finished that one. For Great Britain, England, Scotland and Wales, it's CE marking can be used until the end of this year for existing products, but from the end of this year, UKCA marking is required, with one exception, and that exception is where you have goods being manufactured in Northern Ireland and being placed in the GB market, in which case legislation is being prepared to allow CE marking or CE and UK NI marking to continue to be used for placing goods on the market in Great Britain post the end of this year. As far as I can see, it's a unique situation and the only situation whereby CE marking will still be accepted from 1st of January 2022. And just to finish it off, as I've said, if you want to export to the EU, you need to continue to CE mark the product. I am done now. Okay, so potentially you might need to use all three marks. And there was some debate early on post-Brexit as to whether this would be acceptable, but it is now pretty much accepted, I think, that you can UKCA mark and CE mark on the same product or the same label, with the proviso that you meet the requirements of the EU and the UK in terms of those markings, and that they are clearly separated to avoid any possibility of confusion. The problem is that UK NI marking will not be accepted by the EU. So you may not use a UK NI mark that is being exported to the EU, and that does include the Republic of Ireland. Another reason I think it's sensible to CE mark the product if you're going to place it on the market in the north of Ireland. Declarations of performance will continue to be required. Unfortunately, this is an area of duplication in that for a declaration of performance for a product in the EU, you'll need to make reference to the EU notified body within that declaration. In the UK, we're going to call them declarations of conformity, not declarations of performance. and those declarations of conformity must reference the UK conformity assessment body within their text. Okay. So a quick plug for the BBA. We have been designated as a technical assessments body, which is equivalent to a tab, to issue ETAs via the UKTAs, living in the past, to issue UKTAs as part of UKCA marking through the voluntary route. We have also been designated as an approved body for certification for System 1 and 1 Plus, for factory production control for Systems 2 Plus, and for testing as part of System 3. So if you need any of those services, then please do get in touch, and there's a designated contact there. So we have these two parallel systems. We have notified bodies in the EU and we have approved bodies in the UK. Are they going to cooperate? Well, the UK government very strongly feels that they should, and they have gone into print stating this, that they expect a maximum of cooperation and a minimum of duplication as part of this process. This was recognised by the withdrawal agreement, which specifically had a clause relating to the use of subcontractors to perform tests and inspections, which would include these subcontractors working in the two different markets. So for 2 Plus factory production control, this system seems to work quite well. If all you want is UKCA marking, you can continue to use your existing pre-Brexit factory production control certificates. There is no need to do anything different. They continue to be acceptable towards UKCA marking. If for any reason you would like a UKCA specific certificate of factory production control, the BBA can provide you with that for a nominal fee, but I would stress you don't need to do it unless you choose to do so for whatever reason. If all you're interested in CE marking, the BBA has formed partnerships with a number of EU-based notified bodies, and we can put you in touch with organisations who can provide you with the necessary European certificates of factory production control. If you need both, using the above partnership arrangements, and we are now into double figures, I think, in terms of organisations with whom we have agreements, we have a system whereby you can obtain EU notified body and UK approved body factory production control certificates on the basis of a single audit. So in the UK, the BBA will come to your factory and carry out the inspection and then issue a report to an EU notified body, and they will then issue a certificate of factory production control for Europe in addition to the one you'll get from the BBA. And clearly, if the factory is located in Europe, then the process works in the same way but in the opposite direction. Okay, Peter. Notified body testing, unfortunately, is where things start to grind to a halt. As many of you will be aware, the EU has refused to accept existing and ongoing UK-based notified body test reports and expects that any testing in support of CE marking will have to be redone by an EU notified test laboratory. Now, the BBA and other UK approved bodies have lobbied quite hard with MHCLG to seek some form of mutual recognition for test reports, but this does not seem likely to happen. What we would have liked to have done was to accept test reports from EU notified bodies and just rebranded them towards UKCA marking, but this required government approval, and at the moment we don't have that. Now, we had a group of approved bodies meeting about 2 weeks ago with MHCLG, and at that point they revealed their thinking on what they would like to do going forward. And I would really like to stress that this is up for negotiation within MHCLG. It is not what's going to happen, but it's their thinking on what might happen. And what they're suggesting is that approved bodies could take existing EU notified body test reports and carry out a formal assessment of those reports, leading to the issue of a new assessment report. And MHCLG potentially could accept that in place of a new test report. Now, there are some caveats to that. The notified body test reports from Europe would have to be both issued before Brexit and less than 5 years old. And the UK approved body carrying out the assessment of those reports would have to be UKCA accredited for the specific tests included within the report. Now, we would like to have a slightly wider acceptance in like a scope. So if we're competent to look at an insulation standard, we should look at all the insulation standards, not go specifically for individual standards, but that conversation will have to be had later. This is intended at the moment, if it does happen, to be a transitional agreement. So they're proposing 18 months, and thereafter that duplication of testing will still have to have been carried out. So it gives you 18 months to get the testing carried out. Not ideal. They have further revealed that the government were originally planning to use the withdrawal agreement as the basis of the secondary legislation to remove CE marking from UK law. They have now apparently decided, instead of doing that, they want to use the upcoming Building Safety Bill as the basis of that secondary legislation. Now, I'm no lawyer, but that bill has to go through both Houses of Parliament, be redrafted no doubt several times before it can be accepted. And MHCLG was suggesting that might take up to a year to achieve. Now, if that's the case, and the legislation to remove CE marking is based on that, then clearly there is going to have to be an extension to the transitional period whereby CE marking is still accepted within the UK. So it may be that the existing deadline of 31st December this year could be extended. But that was, I believe, with MHCLG's lawyers for consideration 2 weeks ago, and we still haven't heard anything further. So it's very much a proposal and nothing definite yet. Thanks, Peter. So as I've said, all of this is based on accreditation. There is a wide range of possible standards. The BBA standards are listed on this UKCA schedule, which is searchable there. We're working with UKCA to increase the scope. I think we've got something like 80 new standards who've already asked UKCA to accredit us for. So a bit of negotiation going on there to find a workable and flexible system whereby we can do that. But we are very conscious, notwithstanding what I've said about possibly extending the transition period, we are running out of time. There is also the possibility, now we have these two parallel systems of standards, that over time, although currently designated and harmonised standards are identical, one market or the other may make changes to those standards, which means they no longer align, and then we will have a divergence and you will have to have two entirely separate assessments. Hopefully not. We'll work to try and avoid that happening, but it's something we need to be aware of as a possibility. Okay, Peter. So finally, the voluntary route. It is intended that should you require UKCA marking where there is no designated standard, you would follow a parallel system to that operated by IOTA, whereby they issue ETAs. In order to do that, the government is talking to the various, I think there's 8 UK tabs to form potentially a UK version of IOTA, and the BBA is fully engaged in that process. Unfortunately, it's not a rapid process. It's taking a little bit of time. MHCLG are talking to IOTA, we're all talking to each other, and the BBA will be in a position to issue UKTAs once these processes have been agreed. However, the BBA has remained an observer to IOTA to maintain an involvement with that organisation, and as part of that, we have been granted a licence by IOTA to use their existing EAD documents as the basis of UK TAs without waiting for the UK version of IOTA to be set up. So we have this unilateral agreement. This means that we are now in a position to start issuing UKTAs based on existing EADs, or indeed to convert ETAs that have already been issued by IOTA into UKTAs, which will enable manufacturers to start the UKCA mark through this voluntary route. Now, we have kept MHCLG fully informed of our intentions in this respect, and they have not come back to us and said, you can't do that. So as far as we're concerned, there is no reason we cannot go ahead and start to issue these UKTAs. But as with the whole of this presentation, it does come with another health warning in that at some point in the future, MHCLG may decide they don't want us to do this. But as far as we're concerned at the moment, we're going ahead, and there is no reason to expect that there would be any objection to this. So if that is of interest to anybody, please get in contact with the BBA and we can start having a conversation around that subject. Thank you, Peter. And that's me done, thank you. 2 minutes to spare, so if anybody has any questions, I'm sure we can run over a little bit longer beyond the half an hour if we need to do so.
Thank you so much, John. Pleasure as always. Yeah, you're right. There are a fair few questions of which I don't think we're going to get round to all of them. As you can imagine, some of them are fairly generic. Some of them are quite specific to people's requirements as a business, as an organisation. So, like I said at the start, thank you so much for your questions. If we don't get round to them, we will get back to you with a more detailed answer over email, and we'll continue that dialogue. So I'll try and get through, or should I say, I'll ask them and John will answer them, but we'll try and get through as many as we possibly can. And again, if we don't know the answer, we'll go and find it out and get back to you with a more comprehensive answer. So the first one is from John. And John says, tests undertaken to a European norm, EN 13501-1 in France, will they be accepted going forward to support our UKCA doc, or would we have to retest in the UK?
Well, as things stand, you'll have to retest in the UK because the government will not accept European test reports towards UKCA marking. As I explained in my slide, there is a proposal going forward that a suitably accredited laboratory might be able to take those reports, and you'll have a transition period then of 18 months to get the products retested. But that remains to be confirmed by MHCLG. It does appear that at some point we are going to have to test everything twice unless they have a change of heart, both in Westminster and in Brussels.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for that, John. Okay, second one is more generic, I feel. So can we use both CE and UKCA marking on packaging that will be sold across the UK, Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland?
Yes, we think there's no reason you can't do that.
Cool, excellent. So here's one from Gary. And Gary says, if you have a current BBA assessment certification for a system manufactured in the European Union, do you still need to apply for UKCA marking?
It really depends what you mean by BBA certificate. If it's a BBA agreement certificate, a statement of fitness for purpose, or our standard product, it's completely unaffected by Brexit. You don't need to do anything additional at all. That's conditional on the product not being covered by a harmonised standard as well. If that's the case, then it's nothing to do with the BBA certificate, but because of the UK CPR, you would have to UKCA mark on the basis of that harmonised standard, but it's not on the basis of the BBA certificate.
Excellent. Okay, Alex is asking if we can share the list of EU notified body partners of the BBA. Yes, we will do that eventually over the coming weeks in some way, shape or form, so look out for that. Let me have a look, just to see if there's any other questions. Okay, so final one from Freddie, because I know we've just run out of time here. So final one, and then if we haven't answered the questions, we'll get back to you on those. So Freddie asks, can we use self-assessment documentation from an EU country that was used for CE marking to enable us to use UKCA marking on the same product?
I think if Freddie can perhaps get in contact with us, that's very specific. That will depend on a number of factors, such as the standard and the Avcp level. But if he'd like to get in touch with us, I'm sure we can help him out with the specifics.
Yes, fantastic, excellent. I'll make sure that we get Freddie's details and get in touch with him there. All these questions, what we'll do on our website, we've got a UKCA hub, of which there's loads of information, loads of links, all the links that John shared in this presentation, a link to this presentation, all sorts going on. And what we'll do, as long as the questions aren't that specific, we will add them to the FAQ section so they're fully searchable, so that people can go on there and have a look at that at their own leisure. So finally from me, really, thank you so much everybody for joining us. Our next webinar is tomorrow at 11, so if you signed up for that, fantastic. It is oversubscribed, so get in early if you can. And that will be looking at UKCA marking conformity and the steps to get that conformity. And then the final one on Wednesday, 11 AM again, we'll look at ETA to UKTA respectively. So finally, thank you so much for joining us. And John, thank you so much for your time. And we will speak to you all tomorrow. Goodbye.